So the next stage of the process is what we call appreciative interviewing. The point of these interviews is to find out where things are working well already, or in people's memories when they've been in a relationship between doctors and managers that has worked. So what we're trying to do is, rather than say follow this book and follow the instructions, actually just get into your tacit knowledge, what you already know about what makes productive relationships between doctors and managers. And the way we do this is we ask you to work in threes. So you find 3 people, and it's a mixed group, and they're going to take 3 different roles one at a time. So the very first thing that people do is just jot down a story. Just take a piece of paper and quietly on your own write down a story of when you've had a productive relationship with your other half. If you're a doctor with a manager, if you're a manager with a doctor. Well, a real story, something where it's made a difference and where you personally are involved. So this is not a story about somebody else, but a story about you. Everyone writes their story down, and that's just an age memoir. It's not something to give out or share. And then in threes, explain the 3 roles using the information you've got in the toolkit. But there are 3 main roles. The first one is the storyteller. That person's going to tell their story, but they just remind themselves using their notes if they want to, and they're going to tell that richly and fully. And you've got an observer and you've got an interviewer. So the observer and interviewer stay completely quiet. So whilst this person, the storyteller, is telling their story, the observer and interviewer are looking for the moments at which this person came to life, where they got interested, looking for the few things that really made a difference. The interviewer asks the storyteller questions to help generate insight, not nosy questions, not questions about, oh, how did you do that, because I quite like to do that. Not questions for their own intent, but questions to help the storyteller really understand what it was that made that relationship work. So the interviewer will ask questions about, have you ever done that before? What was it in particular? What made you choose to do this? You know, those sorts of counselling type questions really, that help the interviewee, the storyteller, really connect with the underlying principles, the underlying conditions that made this story work for them. So the storyteller talks out for several minutes, the interviewer then gets a chance to ask some questions, and all this time the observer is taking notes. They're not taking notes of the story, they're taking notes of those underlying things that helped. So the storyteller might say, well, we had really good communication. The interviewer will ask them, well, what do you mean by good communication? Was it a newsletter? Did you send each other emails? And the story will go, no. Gave each other feedback. Actually, we just checked in regularly. I gave them space to tell me what was up, and they gave me space to tell them what was up. And so the observer's notes are not that good communication is the answer, but taking time to listen was the answer for this storyteller. So really get into those underlying conditions. And then you have a conversation between the 3 of you. What were the few things that made a difference in this story? And then you swap roles. The interviewer becomes the storyteller, the observer becomes the interviewer, the storyteller becomes the observer, and you repeat it. And then again you debrief together what were the underlying conditions. And they're likely to be different. There may be some similarities, but you're not looking for similar. You're just looking for what was for that story. And then you repeat it again. The original observer becomes the storyteller, etc. And after having debriefed, you then start mapping which issues were common to us and which were different. But the different ones might be critical. It's just in this one instance we needed that condition to be in place. So try and pull those out, and that's what you'll share as a whole group, mapping that on the wall, beginning to look for the underlying things that we need to be in place. And what we know from the management and medicine inquiry, that some of the underlying conditions were that the clinical business was the real business. That actually the first conversation was always impact on patients. The first conversation wasn't impact on money. So that when doctors and managers work well together, whenever they were trying to make some change, their first concern was patients, not their first concern being impact on money. The money conversation came after. So for instance, that might be one of the conditions that you might find for your conversations.